Welcome back to our channel. Have you ever wondered what happens when your destiny isn't a crown but a simple wooden harp? When your greatest enemy is the very person you were sent to save? The story you're about to hear is not a simple epic of good versus evil. It is a journey into the most shadowed corners of the human heart, where love, jealousy, and redemption collide in a symphony that is both tragic and magnificent. I promise you, the ending of this story will make you question everything you thought you knew. It will redefine your understanding of what makes a hero and what makes a villain. Before we turn that first page together, let's take a moment. I want to feel your presence here with us. Let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. From the cities that never sleep to the quiet villages bathed in the morning sun, drop a comment below. It's an amazing feeling to know that across thousands of miles, we are all sharing this moment together. All right, take a deep breath. Let your world fade away. Let us begin. The kingdom of Seriphus was dying. It wasn't being killed by war or by famine, but by a strange and insidious disease, a plague of the soul known only as the Whispering Blight. It left no sores upon the skin, no fever in the blood. Instead, it planted seeds of doubt and despair deep within the mind. It began in the cold marble halls of the royal palace, and then, like a toxic fog, it crept outwards, seeping into every city street and every farmer's field. The leaves on the ancient trees of Seriphus no longer shone with vibrant green, but withered into a sickly silver gray. The sound of children's laughter vanished from the cobblestone squares, replaced by anxious gazes and fearful murmurs shared only in the deepest shadows. The kingdom's famed prosperity was now a distant memory. It was a fading land, hushed and terribly afraid. And at the heart of this decay, seated on a throne of cold iron, was King Caelan. Bards still sang songs of him, of the great warrior king with a lion's mane of hair and eyes that burned like stars. It was his hands that had forged Seriphus from the ashes of the old wars. But that was the Caelan of yesterday. The king of today was a hollow echo of his former self. Every night, nightmares tormented him, visions of his kingdom crumbling to dust. The legacy he had spent a lifetime building was slipping through his fingers like sand. That fear had twisted him, turning him into a tyrant haunted by paranoia. Every piece of counsel was perceived as a challenge to his authority, every glance an act of insubordination. The king's heart, once a fire that warmed the entire kingdom, had become a heavy block of ice, freezing all who dared to draw near. The seeress, Ilara, was his closest advisor, the only one who still possessed the courage to look him in the eye. She felt his pain and the kingdom's pain more keenly than anyone. Having served the royal line since the time of Caelan's father, her heart ached to witness this decline. One sleepless night, as she meditated beneath the silver light of the moon, a vision came to her. It was not an image of armies or battles, but the sound of a melody so pure, so clear, it felt like cool water from a mountain spring. It held the power to soothe a broken spirit, to wash away the stain of the Whispering Blight. She understood then. The cure for Seriphus lay not in a sword or a crown, but in that song. She knew what she must do. The next morning, Ilara donned the simple robes of a pilgrim and slipped away from the magnificent dying capital. She told no one of her quest, not even the king, for her mission was too fragile, too unbelievable. She was not seeking a new general or a powerful ally. She was embarking on a search for the song-bearer, the one soul whose music could save the king, and in doing so, save Seriphus itself. Her journey was a gamble on faith, a desperate search in a land slowly being consumed by darkness. Ilara's journey took her through blighted fields and silent villages, places where the Whispering Blight had choked all life. She saw farmers staring blankly at their barren earth, craftsmen whose tools lay rusting and forgotten. Hope was beginning to feel like a fool's currency. Then, one late afternoon, as she passed through the rolling western hills, a region the despair had not yet fully claimed, she heard it, a melody. It was unlike anything she had ever heard in the palace courts. It was not a grand, formal anthem or a sorrowful ballad. This music was simple, unadorned, yet it held a strange and potent magic. It soared on the wind, weaving through the leaves of the trees, seeming to coax the green back into them. Following the sound, Alara found its source. Leaning against the trunk of an ancient oak, surrounded by a flock of peacefully grazing sheep, was a young man. His brown hair was a wind-tossed mess, and his clothes were the simple, worn tunics of a shepherd. But his eyes were as clear as a sky after a cleansing rain. His long fingers danced across the strings of an old, battered harp, and from it flowed the melody of healing. His name was Liam. He was a shepherd, nothing more, whose only worldly possessions were his flock and his harp. But Alara, with the wisdom of a seeress, saw far more. She saw a heart unblemished by ambition or greed. She saw a spirit that was in tune with the natural world, with the rhythm of life itself. He wasn't just playing music, he was communing with the world around him. She approached slowly. The sheep looked up but showed no fear, as if they too could sense the quiet power the woman carried. Liam stopped playing, his curious gaze falling upon the stranger. "Your melody," Alara said, her voice low and warm. "It holds a rare power." Liam offered a shy smile. "My lady, they are just tunes I make up to keep the flock from wandering." "No," Alara said, her conviction absolute as she sat down across from him. "It is medicine. Our kingdom is gravely ill, Liam. It suffers from a sickness of sorrow, and our king bears the deepest wound of all." She did not tell Liam he was chosen, that destiny had marked him for a throne. To do so would be to plant the seed of pride in his pure heart, the very thing that could destroy his gift. Instead, she spoke to him with raw honesty. She described King Kalen not as a tyrant, but as a grieving father, a lost hero. She told him that his talent might be the last hope, the only candle that could be lit in the suffocating darkness of the palace. "I do not ask you to fight," Alara pleaded, her voice a soft entreaty. "I only ask that you bring your music to him. Give him a reason to hope again." Liam was quiet for a long time. He looked at his flock, at the familiar hills that had been his only home. Then he looked into Alara's eyes, and in their depths, he saw the wisdom of ages and the weight of a kingdom. He saw not a command, but a whisper of compassion, and his gentle heart would not allow him to refuse. He nodded. "I will go." It was a simple decision made by a simple heart, but it was the decision that set in motion an epic that would change the destiny of Seraphos forever. Liam stood, dusted off his clothes, and with his old harp in hand, he walked with Alara down the path that led toward the capital, leaving his peaceful life behind to face a fate he could not possibly imagine. When Liam first set foot in the great hall of the Seraphos palace, he felt as small as a single grain of sand on an endless shore. Marble columns soared to a vaulted ceiling painted with elaborate frescoes. Silken tapestries depicting dragons and kings lined the walls, and golden sconces cast a light that was warm yet distant. The opulence was a world away from the simple life of the hills. Courtiers, draped in lavish velvets and silks, moved with a practiced grace, but their eyes were cold and appraising. The very air was thick with tension, like a harp string pulled too taut, ready to snap at any moment. And at the far end of the hall, upon his throne, sat King Kalen, a figure of immense presence yet burdened by a palpable gloom, his face a mask of exhaustion and suspicion. Alara led Liam before the throne. The young shepherd, in his plain-spun clothes clutching his harp, looked utterly out of place. A few whispers broke out among the courtiers, quiet smirks hidden behind gloved hands. They couldn't fathom why the revered seeress had brought a peasant before the king. Kalen narrowed his eyes. "This is your cure, Alara. A boy with a toy." Elara did not answer the king. She simply turned to Liam and gave him a slight, reassuring nod. Taking a deep breath, Liam ignored the mocking stares and the suffocating grandeur. He sat down on the cool stone floor, settled the harp on his lap, and began to play. The first notes that filled the hall were clear and hesitant, like the first drops of a gentle morning rain. The whispers died instantly. Liam's music was nothing like the complex martial anthems or sorrowful dirges usually played in the court. It was simple, elemental. It spoke of trickling streams and whispering winds, of the quiet, primordial peace that this place had long since forgotten. Then something miraculous happened. The perpetual scowl on King Kaelin's brow softened. His hands, which were always clenched white-knuckled on the arms of his throne, slowly relaxed. The phantoms of paranoia, the whispers of despair that constantly tormented him, seemed to recede, pushed back by the sheer purity of the sound. For the first time in months, a fleeting moment of peace settled in the king's troubled soul. When Liam finished, a profound silence held the hall captive. Kaelin looked at the young man, and this time there was no contempt in his eyes, only stunned disbelief. From that day forward, Liam remained in the palace. Every day he would play for the king. His melodies became a balm, the only thing that could quiet the storms raging within Kaelin. Slowly, the king grew fond of the boy. In Liam, he saw a sincerity and an innocence he couldn't find in any of his calculating courtiers. He began to summon Liam to his private dinners, listening to his stories of life in the hills, and he started to look upon him almost as a son. This affection wasn't limited to the king. Liam's gentle nature and undeniable gift won him favor throughout the court. He found a particularly strong connection with Finian, Kaelin's eldest son and heir. Finian was nothing like his father. He was a quiet, thoughtful man, his heart heavy with worry for the king's decline. He saw in Liam a kindred spirit, a true friend. They would often walk together in the royal gardens, talking for hours. Finian admired Liam's talent, and Liam respected the prince's kindness and wisdom. Yet it was this growing wave of affection that would become the poison. Kaelin began to notice things. He saw the way his generals looked at Liam with open admiration. He heard the serving maids whisper about the handsome musician with the gentle smile, and most painfully, he saw his own son, Finian, give Liam the easy friendship and trust that he, the king, no longer received. A toxic seed was planted in his paranoid mind. It was more than jealousy. It was a primal fear, the fear of an aging lion seeing a new, vibrant star rising. He began to question everything. Had Elara brought Liam here merely to heal him or to replace him? Was this music a cure or a spell that was slowly stealing the loyalty of his people? His initial fondness curdled into a sick suspicion. Kaelin still summoned Liam, still listened to his harp, but now he wasn't listening for peace. He was listening for a sign of betrayal, a discordant note, a flicker of deceit in the boy's eyes. The young man he had once seen as a gift from the heavens was now in the king's tormented mind, slowly transforming into a threat. The fragile peace Liam had woven within the palace walls was shattered by news from the northern frontier. The Valerium tribes, the kingdom's ancient and bitter rivals, had united under a new chieftain. He was a giant of a man, a mountain of flesh and bone known only as Vorlog, the Unbreakable. It was said that no blade could pierce his skin, no arrow could make him flinch. Vorlog and his horde were sweeping through the border villages, spreading terror and leaving nothing but ash in their wake. King Kaelin, for all his inner turmoil, was still a warrior. The news ignited a spark of his old fire. He marshaled his army and marched to the Valley of Howling Winds to confront the enemy. But when the two armies faced each other across the valley floor, the morale of the Seraphos soldiers crumbled. The sight of Vorlog, standing a full head taller than any other man, a colossal war axe resting on his shoulder, was enough to extinguish their will to fight. Every day, Vorlog would stride out into the open, his taunts echoing through the valley like thunder. He mocked King Kalen, calling him an old lion with no teeth. He challenged any champion of Seraphos to face him in single combat. No one dared. The bravest generals averted their eyes. The soldiers trembled behind their shields. This palpable fear fed the whispering blight, tightening its grip on the heart of the army. Liam, as the king's musician, was present in the war camp. He was no warrior, but he could not bear the humiliation. He saw the despair in the soldiers' eyes and the helplessness on Finian's face. He knew he had to do something. That night, Liam didn't sleep. He walked the length of the stream that cut through the valley, studying every rock, every bush. He observed how the powerful gusts of wind funneled through the canyon, creating strange, whistling sounds. The mind of a shepherd, accustomed to using nature to his advantage, began to form a plan. The next morning, to everyone's astonishment, Liam went before the king's tent and asked to accept Vorlog's challenge. Kalen let out a bitter laugh. "You, a musician? What will you do, sing him to sleep with your harp?" The generals looked at him with pity, but Finian saw a fierce resolve in his friend's eyes. "Father," the prince urged, "we have lost all hope. Let him try. What more do we have to lose?" Kalen finally agreed, partly out of desperation, partly out of a morbid curiosity to see what foolishness the boy would attempt. He ordered his finest armor brought forth, but Liam refused it. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am not used to such things. They would only slow me down." He asked only for a strong coil of rope and a small, sharp dagger. Liam walked out into the center of the valley, clad only in his simple shepherd's clothes. Vorlog saw his challenger and roared with laughter, a sound that seemed to shake the very ground. "Has Seraphos run out of men? They send a boy to die in their place?" Liam said nothing. He walked calmly toward a narrow cliff face where jagged rocks jutted out. Vorlog, with the arrogance of an undefeated champion, followed. It was a trap. Liam, with an agility born from years of scrambling across hillsides, darted between the rocks, luring Vorlog into a tight ravine where the giant could barely swing his massive axe. Using the rope, Liam had laid a simple but effective snare. Vorlog, charging forward in a blind rage, caught his foot and lost his balance. The giant crashed to the ground, his head striking a sharp outcrop of rock with stunning force. Before Vorlog could recover, Liam was upon him, quick as a flash. He didn't try to pierce the giant's rock-hard skin with his dagger. Instead, he plunged the blade into the soft, unprotected gap in the armor at Vorlog's neck. A gurgling roar of agony echoed once, then fell silent. Vorlog the Unbreakable had fallen. For a moment, the valley was silent. Then it erupted. The army of Seraphos, their despair transformed into a euphoric rage, surged forward, crashing into the Valerium line, which was already in chaos at the loss of their leader. It was a spectacular victory. Liam returned to the camp a hero. Soldiers hoisted him onto their shoulders. Finian embraced him, weeping with joy. But King Kalen did not celebrate. He stood amidst the cheering, his face a mask of ice. He did not see a hero who had saved his kingdom. He saw a shepherd boy who had done what he, the great king, could not. He saw the boy who had stolen his last shred of glory. That night at the victory feast, as the songs praising Liam's name rang louder than any anthem for the king, the rage Kalen had been suppressing finally exploded. While Liam was playing a quiet tune on his harp, Kalen abruptly rose, seized a spear from a nearby guard, and hurled it with all his might. The spear sliced through the air and embedded itself deep into the wooden wall just behind Liam, quivering only inches from his head. The music stopped. The cheering died. Every eye in the tent flew from the king, who stood heaving, his eyes bloodshot with fury, to the musician who was frozen in place, his face pale with shock. In that single violent moment, the fragile bond between them was irrevocably severed. King Kalen had officially declared his savior to be his mortal enemy. The great hall was suffocated by a dead silence. The spear, still trembling in the wall, was a cold, sharp testament to the king's madness. Liam stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs. He wasn't looking at the spear, he was looking directly at Kaelin. He no longer saw a king, but a man completely consumed by his own demons. Finian was the first to react. He lunged forward, placing himself between Liam and his father. "Father," he cried, his voice laced with anguish and disbelief. "What are you doing?" "Step aside, Finian," Kaelin roared, his voice ragged. "He is a viper, a traitor in our midst." But Finian held his ground. This single insane act confirmed his deepest fears. His father's reason was lost to the shadows. He knew with chilling certainty that if Liam remained in the palace, he would not live to see the dawn. Later that night, as an uneasy quiet settled over the court, Finian went to Liam's chambers. "You must leave, now," Finian urged, his voice low and tense. "My father will not stop. This jealousy has made a monster of him." Lyra, Finian's sister, was with him. She had witnessed the horror in the hall, and her heart was broken. She had quietly fallen for the gentle musician, and now his life was in mortal danger. "Finian is right," she whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Let me help you." Lyra knew the palace's secret passages. She guided Liam through dark, dusty corridors to a small hidden gate behind the royal gardens. Before they parted, Finian gripped Liam's shoulders. "Go south to the forests of Atonement. The terrain is treacherous. It will be difficult for my father's men to find you there," Finian instructed. "I will find a way to send word. Look for arrows fletched with a strip of blue silk. If I shoot one to fly past you, it means the danger has passed and it is safe. But if an arrow falls short in front of you, run, Liam. Run and never look back." It was more than a plan. It was a pact sealed in shadow, a vow of friendship, a fragile alliance of hope against the madness that had seized the throne. Liam looked at the royal siblings who were risking everything to save him, and his heart swelled with a gratitude too deep for words. He gave a final nod, then melted into the night, beginning his new life as a fugitive. Following Finian's direction, Liam found refuge in the dense forests and limestone caves of Atonement. Word of the musician who had slain a giant only to be hunted by his own king spread like wildfire. Soon his hiding place began to attract others. There were soldiers disgusted by Kaelin's tyranny, farmers who had been stripped of their land, debtors on the run, and broken souls searching for a sliver of hope. Before long, a band of 400 outcasts had gathered around Liam. They looked to him, the hero of the Valley of Howling Winds, and they called him their leader. But Liam felt like a fraud. He was a reluctant leader, tormented by a crippling imposter syndrome. Every night, as he watched these people who had placed their faith in him sleep, he would ask himself, "Who am I to lead them? I am just a shepherd with a harp. How can I possibly stand against a king?" The weight of their lives pressed down on him, nearly crushing his spirit. Meanwhile, his small army needed to eat. Liam learned that a local lord named Borin, a man of immense wealth but notoriously crude and stingy, was holding his annual sheep shearing feast, a time of great celebration and plenty. Liam sent a small envoy, not to raid, but to respectfully request supplies, reminding Borin that Liam's men had been quietly protecting his lands from bandits for months. Borin, however, responded with scorn. "Liam," he bellowed, "a runaway shepherd. Why should I take my bread and my meat to feed a band of rebels and traitors?" When Liam's men returned with the insulting message, a rage unlike anything he had ever known erupted within him. The personal insult, combined with the months of pressure and self-doubt, made him snap. "Strap on your swords," he commanded, his voice tight with fury. "We will teach this fool the price of his arrogance. By dawn, not a single man of Borin's household will be left alive." Liam marched at the head of his men, his heart a furnace of vengeance. He was on the verge of making a terrible mistake, an act of brutality no different from King Kaelin's. But fate intervened. One of Borin's servants, horrified, ran to tell Anya, Borin's wife. Anya was a woman of great wisdom and grace, the complete opposite of her oafish husband. She knew the fury of a slighted hero would be devastating. Without a moment's hesitation, she commanded her servants to prepare a massive offering of bread, wine, and roasted meat, loaded onto donkeys, and took a shortcut to intercept Liam. She met his war party in a narrow mountain pass. The moment she saw Liam, she dismounted and bowed low, her forehead touching the ground. "My lord," she said, her voice calm but urgent, "let the blame fall on me, I beg you, but do not stain your hands with blood because of a fool." She acknowledged the protection his men had offered and the foolishness of her husband. But then she said something that stopped Liam cold. "My lord, destiny has marked you for greatness, to be a healer for this broken kingdom. Do not let a moment of anger destroy that. If you take your revenge today, you will carry the guilt of this needless slaughter forever. And how then, my lord, will you be any different from the king you are fleeing?" Her words were a mirror held up to his very soul. In their reflection, Liam saw himself, a man driven by rage and pride, on the precipice of becoming the very tyrant he despised. The fire in his heart cooled, replaced by a wave of shame. He had been standing at the edge of a dark abyss, and this woman, this stranger, had just pulled him back. "My lady," Liam said, his voice trembling slightly, "you are right. Thank you for saving me from myself." He accepted her gift and turned his men around. That night, Liam could not sleep. He had learned a hard and vital lesson. True strength wasn't just in leading men, but in leading oneself. It was about conquering the demons within. It was a lesson in humility and restraint. A lesson far more important than his victory over Vorlog, and one that was forging him, unbeknownst to him, into a true king. King Kaelin's pursuit grew more obsessive with each passing season. He poured all the kingdom's resources, all of his waking thoughts, into a single, all-consuming goal: to find and destroy Liam. He neglected affairs of state, ignored the spreading rot of the Whispering Blight. For Kaelin, Liam was no longer just a threat. He was the living embodiment of all his failures, his fears, and his decay. If he could just erase Liam from the world, he believed, he could reclaim it all. During a massive sweep through the eastern mountains, Kaelin and his elite guard closed in on Liam's trail. A sudden downpour turned the rugged landscape into a treacherous mire. Seeking shelter from the rain and needing a moment of privacy, Kaelin entered a large cave on the side of a mountain, ordering his men to wait outside. It was a staggering coincidence of fate, for deep in the damp, echoing darkness of that very cave, Liam and his most trusted followers were hiding. They heard the king's approaching footsteps and, peering through a crack in the rock, they recognized him. A ripple of excitement went through Liam's men. "It's him," one of them whispered, his eyes wide. "Destiny has delivered our enemy into our hands, my lord. This is our chance. End this once and for all." Every eye turned to Liam, awaiting his command. Liam's heart pounded. The opportunity was laid bare before him. A single sword thrust was all it would take. The life of a fugitive would be over. The kingdom would be freed from a mad king. He would be hailed as a liberator. He drew his sword, its blade catching the dim light. He motioned for his men to stay silent, and alone, he moved like a shadow toward Kaelin. The king had his back to him, completely vulnerable. Liam could have ended him in a heartbeat. But as he drew closer, as he saw the stooped shoulders of the man who had once been so mighty, a different feeling rose in his chest, eclipsing his anger and his desire for an end to the conflict. He didn't see a tyrant. He saw a broken father, a lost soul. He remembered the early days in the palace when Kaelin had treated him with such kindness. He remembered Anya's words, warning him not to be stained by the sin of bloodshed. Liam slid his sword back into its sheath. Instead, he drew his small dagger and, with deft silence, sliced off a piece of Kaelin's royal cloak. It was a symbolic act, proof of how close he had come, proof that the king's life had been entirely in his hands. His men, watching from the shadows, were confused. They thought he had lost his nerve, but Liam didn't return to them. He did something no one could have predicted. As Kaelin finished his business and stepped toward the mouth of the cave, Liam stepped out of the darkness behind him. "Kaelin!" he called out, his voice echoing in the rain-washed air. The king spun around, his hand flying to the hilt of his sword. He was stunned to see Liam standing there, alone. But Liam didn't attack. He held up the scrap of cloth for the king to see. "Your life was in my hands," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. Then he looked directly into the bewildered king's eyes and shouted a question that came not from his mouth, but from his very soul. It was a question that tore through all of Kaelin's defenses of anger and paranoia. "My king, are you hunting me, or are you running from the whispers in your own heart?" The shout struck Kaelin like a physical blow. It wasn't a challenge, it was an unvarnished truth. For the first time, someone had spoken aloud the very thing he had tried so hard to bury, the thing he feared more than any enemy. The boy before him wasn't a traitor plotting for his throne. He was a mirror, reflecting all the demons Kaelin had been fighting within himself. Kaelin stood frozen, the color draining from his face. The fire in his eyes was extinguished, replaced by a vast, empty confusion and a profound, bottomless pain. For the first time in a very long time, the mighty king of Seriphus was utterly speechless. The young shepherd had defeated him not with a sword, but had disarmed him with the truth. The confrontation in the cave left a deep fissure in Kaelin's soul. He grew quieter, his violent outbursts less frequent, but his obsession with Liam intensified. He no longer hunted him with blind rage, but with a tortured complexity. He was desperate to destroy the reflection of his own misery, yet subconsciously drawn to the one person who might hold the answers. Sometime later, under the light of a silver moon, fate arranged another encounter. Kaelin's army was camped in a low valley. Liam, growing bolder, decided on an act that would surpass even the cutting of the cloak. With his most loyal guardsmen, he crept into the enemy camp in the dead of night. Kaelin's soldiers, exhausted from the long march, were deep in sleep. They found the king's tent. Kaelin lay sleeping, his great war spear stuck in the ground by his head, his royal silver flask of water beside it. Liam's guardsman drew his sword. "It is now or never, my lord. Let me end this." But Liam shook his head. "No," he said softly, "his blood will not be on our hands." He silently took the spear and the water flask, then retreated with his guard to the top of a nearby hill. As the first light of dawn began to break, Liam stood on the peak and shouted down into the valley, rousing the entire camp. He held the spear and flask high, undeniable proof of their vulnerability. Kaelin stormed out of his tent, his face flushed with fury and shame. This time, however, Liam offered no taunts or challenges. He asked that everyone fall back, that he wished to speak with the king alone. Kaelin, driven by a morbid compulsion he didn't understand, agreed. He ascended the hill by himself. They stood facing each other in the pale pre-dawn light. The world was still and quiet. "Do you still not understand, Kaelin?" Liam began, his voice devoid of challenge, filled only with a deep sadness. "Do you think it is these things I want?" He gestured with the spear and the flask. "Do you think I want your throne, your kingdom?" Kaelin remained silent, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. And then Liam revealed the final truth, the one with the power to shatter worlds. This was the twist that would change everything. "When Alara found me," Liam said slowly, deliberately, "she did not tell me I was chosen to be king. She did not send me to replace you. She sent me to heal you." Kaelin stared, uncomprehending. "The whispering blight," Liam continued, "it is not a sickness from the soil or a punishment from the heavens. It began in your heart, Kaelin. Your pain, your paranoia, your fear. It grew so large that it spilled out of you and blanketed this entire kingdom. The people are not sick, they are merely reflecting the agony of their king." Each word was a hammer blow against the fortress Kaelin had built around his heart. "My music," Liam's voice dropped to almost a whisper, was never a weapon for stealing loyalty. It was the antidote for your soul. My purpose was never to take your throne. My purpose was to give you back yourself, to give Seraphos back the great King Kaelon it once loved. Kaelon staggered back as if struck by an invisible force. His legs gave out from under him. The sword fell from his grasp, clattering uselessly on the rocky ground. He looked up at Liam, his eyes wide with a dawning, abject horror. This entire war, this chase, all the bloodshed and hatred, it was all built on a tragic, catastrophic misunderstanding. Liam was not his enemy. He was the cure he had rejected. He was the hope he had tried to extinguish with his own two hands. The final twist had been delivered. The war was never about power. It had always been a desperate, agonizing journey to save a lost soul. And now, in the first light of a new day, the mighty king of Seraphos was completely and utterly broken. The truth Liam delivered didn't just crack Kaelin's defenses, it annihilated them. The walls of pride and paranoia he had spent years constructing crumbled into dust. He knelt on the unforgiving ground, no longer a king, but simply a shattered man confronting the horrifying scale of his own folly. He had hunted his own medicine. He had plunged his kingdom into a living hell out of selfish fear. Tears, which he thought had dried up years ago, began to stream down his gaunt face. Tears of regret, of a loss so profound it was immeasurable. Liam watched him, compassion overwhelming every other emotion. He said nothing more. The silence that fell between them was more potent than any words. But the tragedy of Seraphos was not yet complete. As if destiny itself demanded a final terrible price, the sound of Valerium war horns echoed from the north. The enemy, seeing the armies of Seraphos divided and their king consumed by his internal war, had launched a final all-out assault, more massive and ferocious than any before. The urgent news reached them on the hilltop. Kaelin looked up, his eyes still wet with tears, but now something else flickered within them. In this moment of absolute clarity and pain, he had found his old self, the king he once was. He understood that his blindness had brought his kingdom to the very brink of annihilation. This was his last and only chance at redemption. He pushed himself to his feet and retrieved his sword. He looked at Liam, a look devoid of hatred, filled only with trust and surrender. "Lead them, Liam," Kaelin said, his voice raspy. "I failed them as a king. Do not let me fail them as a soldier." He turned to Finian, who had witnessed it all in stunned silence. He pulled his son into an embrace, the kind he should have given him years ago. "I am sorry, my son, for everything." There was no more time for words. They returned to the Seraphos camp. Kaelin, with his remaining authority, stood before his entire army. He did not command, he confessed. He told them his blindness was the cause of their suffering, and that the kingdom's only hope now lay with the young shepherd beside him. He officially ceded command to Liam. The final battle was an inferno of steel and blood. Kaelin fought like a lion awakened. He no longer fought for glory or legacy, but to protect his people, to atone for his sins. He fought alongside Finian, father and son, united as they always should have been, and most of all, he fought to protect Liam. In a chaotic melee, a Valerium champion broke through the line, swinging a massive spiked mace directly at Liam, who was occupied directing the flank. It was a blow Liam could not have seen coming, but Kaelin saw it. Without a shred of hesitation, he threw himself in the path of the blow, taking the full, devastating impact upon his own body. The spiked mace shattered his armor. He fell, blood spilling from his lips. Liam and Finian rushed to his side. Kaelin grasped Liam's hand, his eyes dimming. "The melody," he rasped. "You must let it continue." He then turned to Finian, a faint final smile touching his lips. "You were always my pride." And with that, the great king of Seraphos breathed his last on the field of battle, dying not in shame, but in the ultimate act of sacrifice. His death sent a shockwave of furious grief through the Seraphos soldiers. They fought now not just for their kingdom, but for their fallen king. Kalin's sacrifice became the turning point. Grief was forged into strength. Liam, his heart breaking but his will unbreakable, seized the king's fallen banner and led the charge. He was no longer a musician or a reluctant leader. He had become the symbol of his people's resilience. The roar of his name and King Kalin's name mingled together, drowning out the clash of swords. They fought until the sun set, and as the last light faded, the Valerium army was broken and scattered. The kingdom of Seraphos was saved, but it was a victory steeped in sorrow. After the battle, Liam walked the field, searching for survivors. He found Finian leaning against a tree, mortally wounded. He had fought valiantly beside his father to the very end. Liam held his friend as his life slipped away. Finian looked at him, a sad smile on his face. "You did it, Liam. Take care of them," he whispered, and then was gone. In a single day, Liam had lost the man he once saw as an enemy, and the man who was his truest friend. A throne awaited him, but it had never felt so cold or so empty. Liam's coronation was not a festival. It was a solemn memorial. He wore no opulent robes, only simple white linen. He stood before his people not to receive their praise, but to share in their grief. He spoke of Kalin's sacrifice and Finian's courage, and of the costly lessons they had all been forced to learn. His reign began not with a decree of power, but with an act of healing. He had 2 great tombs built, side by side, on the highest hill overlooking the capital, one for Kalin and one for Finian. He did not try to erase the past, but to honor it in all its beauty and its tragic flaws. Then he began his true journey as king, not with an army at his back, but with his harp in his hands. He traveled to every village, to the places where the whispering blight had left its deepest scars. He sat with the farmers and the craftsmen, and he played. His music, now imbued not just with purity, but with the depth of loss, of understanding, and of compassion, seeped into the weary souls of his people. It watered the dry ground of their hearts with hope, and slowly, gently, it washed away the despair that had held them captive for so long. The kingdom of Seraphos began to heal, not by royal edict, but note by note from the heart of a shepherd king. Our story ends with a quiet image. Years later, King Liam, now a man with the lines of wisdom etched on his face, sits alone between the 2 great tombs of Kalin and Finian. He is playing his harp, a melody that is at once sorrowful and full of hope, a song for his lost friends, and for a kingdom reborn from the ashes. He was not the king chosen by a prophecy. He was the king forged by compassion, tempered by his own mistakes, and defined by his capacity for forgiveness. And the kingdom of Seraphos, under his care, finally learned its most important lesson, that the greatest strength is found not in a crown, but in the power to heal our deepest wounds, both in the world and within ourselves. A new beginning is always possible, not by forgetting the past, but by embracing it. If this story has moved you, if it has made you think about the line between hero and villain, about the power of redemption and the resilience of the human spirit, then our journey together is only just beginning. There are countless stories like this waiting to be told, worlds waiting to be explored. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an adventure with us. Thank you for listening, and until the next story, be well.